We are now 167 days away from the midterms, and today, 2 police officers who were attacked during the January 6 riots at the Capitol sued to block Donald Trump's $1.776 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund. Officers Harry Dunn and Daniel Hodges filed suit against Scott Bessent and the Treasury Department, saying the fund is straight up illegal. Even some Republicans on Capitol Hill seem uncomfortable with Trump's settlement. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said he's, quote, not a fan of the fund, and that he is not sure how the Trump administration intends to use it. Really? He's not sure? I think he is. Today, Republican Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick of Pennsylvania said the Republicans would try to kill the fund, and they are looking at their legislative options. A couple of things to know about Brian Fitzpatrick. He just won his primary uncontested last night, so he is safe from a Trump-backed challenger. And his district went to Kamala Harris by less than a point in 2024. Now, when it comes to just who might get these hundreds of millions of dollars, I'm going to share it with how the New York Times framed it. January 6 rioters are elated at Trump's fund. January 6 rioters, Proud Boys, leaders Enrique Tarrio said, quote, it is a good direction. We've got a lot to cover, but you're in luck. We have a superb nightcap here. Philip Bump, senior data editor and columnist for the CT Insider, Ron Insana, who is now an MS contributor and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack. Lizzie O'Leary, her first visit to the nightcap, host of What Next, TBD, Slate's podcast about tech, power, and the future. And a man we have not seen in a while, and we are glad to have him back, Charles Coleman Jr., former New York prosecutor and civil rights attorney. Okay, Charles, we're going to start with you. And Lizzie, welcome.
Thank you.
I hadn't seen Lizzie in 10 years, and this week, it's twice in 1 week. It is a privilege. What are the chances that this lawsuit from these 2 officers succeeds? And how vulnerable is this fund to other legal challenges, right? This is just day 1, and there's already a lawsuit.
I think that first and foremost, a big part of what we're looking at here, Stephanie, is about venue. Who is the judge that this goes before? Legally speaking, I think that Officer Dunn and his co-petitioner are on strong grounds to move forward with blocking this fund taking place. I also think that Congress could do a whole lot to help that out in the meantime. Whether that will happen remains to be seen. But sticking strictly to what was going to happen in the courts, that's going to depend on how much a judge is going to be willing to entertain their arguments based off of whatever they've asserted in their pleadings and then whatever they sort of argue going forward. I think it's a good shot, legally speaking. However long it's allowed to linger is going to depend on whether a judge is going to allow for some novel legal arguments to take place in order to support the fund.
What does it say about the current political environment that there is already a Republican congressman in a moderate district saying on the record they're going to kill this settlement?
Well, I think it's a sign that Republicans understand that this midterm election is shaping up to be very bad for them. I mean, it's already shaping up to be bad for them. It was going to be bad for them no matter what Donald Trump had done, just because when a new president comes in, it tends to be bad for his party. Donald Trump has done nothing but make it worse. The war in Iran, causing gas prices to go up, with tariffs, with the various, the ballroom, all these
Yes, but if they don't
things.
stand in lockstep with them, they don't win their primaries.
I know, but the primaries are now over. To your point, right? The primaries are out of the way, and so a lot of these people now have the space to move toward the middle, which is what you normally see. And so they recognize that this is toxic. This is napalm. Like, the people who are excited about this are literally people who are convicted of terroristic threats against the Capitol or, storming the building. Like, those are the people who are most excited about it because they see this as potentially putting money in their pocket. That is bad politics. And Republicans, I think, understand in general, if you're giving $1.8 billion to someone, much less doing so under this absolutely contrived idea that there was some sort of weaponization, which is just total nonsense, like, that's bad politics. And so I think you're going to see people who are at least not willing to stand up and say, hey, we think this is good, the way they are with the ballroom, where you can at least make an argument for it. Well, not a good one.
Between the terrible political optics, the legal challenges, potential action from Congress, and the high possibility that a future administration is going to throw this deal completely out, there's a good chance this thing won't actually survive. Yet, Donald Trump is pursuing it. What should we take away from that?
That he still thinks he has the juice to get enough members of his party to fall in line. But I kind of agree with Philip. Like, I think you have people like Bill Cassidy, who doesn't care anymore, right? He's willing to just go out there and say whatever he wants at this point. Tom Tillis, who can look at his state and see what a purple state looks like. I don't know. I mean, I feel like every time we come to some Rubicon crossing moment, I think, oh, this is it. This is the moment. And then it doesn't happen and they fall in lockstep anyway. But at a certain point, when you back primary challenges again and again and again, you are going to lose members of your own party.
Let's talk about the business community, because we are talking about a massive fund that Trump allies can control, plus an enormous pass from any sort of tax audit for Donald Trump, his family, and his business. What are your sources in the business world telling you? Because I'll tell you, I called a CEO before we knew about this fund, when it was Trump still suing for $10 billion. And the CEO I called said, you know what? Lina Khan blocking business cost me more. I don't care, and hung up.
That's not something I've heard. I would say that talking to a tax attorney yesterday, it's intriguing as to whether or not this would set a precedent for others in a similar situation, because this is a private citizen. It's not just the president who's being granted this settlement, by the way, and then the future indemnification, if you will, of any IRS examinations. What does that mean for anybody else who's in a similar situation? Will they be allowed to tell the IRS, no, you can't investigate me because you're not investigating another private citizen who has a beef with the IRS? Also interesting, which I was reading this evening, is that this is coming in the form of a settlement to Donald Trump. And one individual makes the argument that this is a taxable event for him, that he could owe hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes on the settlement. And there's a 6-year look back from the IRS that means the next IRS commissioner might bill the president several $100 million for the $1.8 billion that he is in receipt of. That, to me, is intriguing.
You know, Stephanie, I'm listening to Ron talk, and I appreciate being in the weeds around the tax implications, especially from a legal standpoint. Yeah.
But I feel a however coming.
I don't want us to sort of like rush past the plot here.
No, of course not. Of course not.
I think, and I think,
and the plot being, this is crazy.
This is absolutely insane. There is one thing to advance notions of political ideology, or even if we want to go and double down on that, the notion of what a patriot looks like. It's an entirely different thing to utilize and weaponize the Justice Department and the courts as a means of making it profitable to break the law.
And even more important, I think, is that the families of the policemen and other officers who died and the policemen themselves who were traumatized by this are not eligible to receive any of this, and they are the true victims in all of this, not the ones who perpetrated the crime. So I think even more so, that's critical to this conversation.
I also think that we should keep in mind that the people who are going to get the biggest payouts here are probably not the January 6th rioters. It's the cronies. It's the people who, it's the Steve Bannon.
The Mike exactly. Wants $400 million.
Right. And I also think it's important, like, it's hard for us as human beings to conceive of how much money $1.8 billion is. It is equivalent. I went back and looked at the math. In 2023, it is equivalent to $3 of every $100 that was paid by residents of Connecticut in that fiscal year. 3 out of every $100 is now going into this fund that is going to go to Donald Trump's friends because he's settling with a case that the IRS itself said they weren't going to be able to win, right? Yeah. And that the judge said, well, there is no settlement agreement when she dismissed the case.
More money than is going to the southeastern United States for COVID relief, disaster relief. Like, that's 1.2. It's just a staggering amount of money.
But if we look at Tuesday and we think about what it means for
Tuesday, meaning yesterday, Thomas Massie losing.
Correct. If we look at that, it's a very interesting juxtaposition to watch MAGA sort of contract as a party under Donald Trump, while the rest of the party that is not necessarily centrist MAGA having to try and maintain some degree of an appeal to either people who are on the fringe that identify as GOP or independents that they will need come November. So this split, to me, is very interesting because the folks who are in that latter group, they're not necessarily going to be in support of something like this.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about a new topic, Iran. Today, the president said he is in no hurry to end the war, and he brushed off the idea that it could hurt him in the midterms.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know that the war hurts him in the midterms. There's new polling came out from Fox today. About 40% of Americans support the war, which is not very high, but it's also not dismal. I think that's in part just because we've reached this point of stasis. Nothing's changed in the past month or so. But of course, the real issue is the gas prices. Gas prices are high. Gas prices continue to be high. I was in New London today where Donald Trump was giving his speech, and I was at a gas station. I asked the guy where gas was $4.59 outside. What, how much has it gone up? He said it's gone up $1.50 in the past 6 months, right? And everyone that I talked to was like, this is hurting my business. That's the issue, right? It's not Iran. If the Strait of Hormuz gets worked out and gas prices go back down, maybe things are better. But Iran itself isn't the issue.